conversation from the porch, if you're familiar with Project Nana. So we're having this comfortable conversation about such an icon. I watched you beaming with pride as you watched the PBS video about your sister. What does it mean to you to be able to make sure her name lives on?
Well, it's actually it's not even much of a challenge because of the impact she's made on so many lives. All I have to do is just simply acknowledge it. Feeling the energy even in this room as I have in many other rooms. Carrying on her legacy or keeping the torch alit has been no challenge at all for me. It's mostly I've been warmed by that and reflected in all of you who have come to know her and love her. And I guess my major job is to tell a little bit of inside baseball stories.
Yeah, yeah.
Just growing up, as you know, Gwen was my little sister for a while before she became really big. A year and a half sort of separated us. And we grew up together. We were each other's best friends, mostly by family edict. You know, I was supposed to look after her as her big brother. Basically, after the age of 10, that was not necessary. She really could take care of herself and me. But yeah, we grew up together, and seeing her celebrated as this occasion does, it really does warm my heart. But mostly because it reminds me about how a person of consequence can make a difference for so many people in the world, many of whom she maybe never met. Some who maybe come up after her passing. I keep running into young people who tell me about how inspired they've been by her example. And so, as I said, I don't really have to keep the torch lit.
She's doing that from heaven. She absolutely is. And I have to share with you all, this is a huge full circle moment for me. I was applying for an internship while I was a student at Florida A&M University. And they said, who inspires you? Whose footsteps would you want to follow? And then I wrote about your sister. I wrote about Gwen Ifill. Forgive me, getting a little teary now, but just to see someone step so fully into their purpose and to live that out so fully, and losing her at such a young age is devastating, but like you said, she is inspiring people even now. Listening to some of the things people said about her, I watched all the PBS videos, just so you know. People said she was like a magnet, a supernova, heart and soul, and the gold standard. When you hear that, what rings in your heart?
I always appreciate accurate reporting. I'll just tell you one of those little behind-the-scenes stories because, as I said, we grew up together, and finally when we went off to college, that was the first time we weren't really joined at the hip. And I remember getting a phone call during her senior year, the spring of her senior year. She was very excited. She was getting her first job at the Herald American in Boston. And as she was talking excitedly about what she was going to do, and of course, you know, your first job is not very consequential. I think she was a ghostwriter for the advice column. That was her first job. But at one point, it occurred to me to tell her this, you know, Gwen, you're the star of the family now. That was back in 1977, and I enjoy being right. But hearing those accolades, I mean, we can add others that she was an extraordinary confidant for a great circle of friends. She was a font of not only just good sense and good wisdom, but good food, and really nurtured a number of people. And gave, I think, an example too, and I want to turn this over to you a little bit, about, okay, as you rise in your career, how do you lift other people up? And one of her best friends, Michelle Norris, that's essentially her mantra. And I think as you're now maturing in your career, you have the chance to mentor people just as you felt mentored, even at a distance from Gwen's example. So I think one of the enduring things about her legacy is that notion of lifting other people up, even as you're rising, and that you're not thinking of yourself as part of a zero-sum game where my success depends on your failure. In Gwen's view, her success depended on the success of other people around her, and she devoted a lot of her time, especially in the latter part of her career, to making that happen.
And I'll have you know that that is my mission. I call them baby anchors. There's some baby anchors out there across the country who it's a whole network of us who are doing that because of the example that Gwen Ifill has set. I do want to talk about a big part of the reason why she is being honored today, and that is the endometrial cancer. Had to be a devastating journey for your family. What are you comfortable sharing about how she came to learn that she had endometrial cancer?
Well, you know, it's interesting hearing what the other physicians have said, because it is a mysterious journey. She didn't really know what it was for months. She felt sort of tightness in her ribs. She was coughing a lot. She wasn't quite sure what was going on. One of our cousins is actually a physician who said, well, maybe it's pneumonia, maybe it's something else. And it wasn't until she really went up to New York, Sloan Kettering, where we got the definitive diagnosis. And I was with her when the doctor sort of announced it and said stage 4, and we kind of looked at each other like, are we really hearing what we're hearing? The doctor was matter of fact about it, and so it didn't really land with the punch that it could. But I think she determined at that moment, okay, whatever it is, you know, obviously it's in God's hands, and I'm just going to keep going. And I'm not going to make a big deal out of this. When I need people, I will call them, and you know, I got a few of those calls myself over the next year, really 9 months. And she kept her faith in herself, in her abilities to do things, and she also was gratefully receiving the people's assistance and support. And I've got to say that folks at PBS at the NewsHour were extraordinary, giving her space and grace, as her friend Michelle pointed out, to be able to do as much as she could, including, you saw a clip from the debate in Milwaukee. That was in the spring after she was diagnosed. She was able to keep a more or less full work schedule, including both conventions, Democratic and Republican conventions 2016. And it was tough, but I think it was sort of the idea of saying, we're just going to keep going. We're going to keep going. We're not going to dwell on the tragedy of this as much as we can. And indeed, even in her last days, when the doctors gathered around her, Johns Hopkins, her response was, okay, what's the plan? You know, she had a week to live, and she was still doing that. And the very last conversation we had in the hospital, and just before she went to hospice, she just said to me, I have no doubts. And she repeated it twice. She was in great pain. She was, you know, had all kinds of medication flowing through her. It was the end, and that was part of our conversation. And she just simply said, I have no doubts.
I have no doubts. What do you think she meant by that? I have no doubts.
It's a very good question. I think a number of things. I think she says, I have no doubt where I'm going. No, when I pass. I have no doubt that my legacy is secure. I have no doubt that our love between me and her, we're still there. I have no doubt that I'm going to fight this through to the end. That's how I sort of interpret it.
To live a life where you have no doubts. To live a life where you have no doubts. What do you think kept her going, even toward the end? As you said, moderating the town hall, the debate, even as she was facing the end, she kept going. Why was journalism so important to her that she kept going even though she knew what was coming?
That was a great question. I think for her, the way I put it in one of sort of talks I gave is I said there were two things that really motivated her: getting the story right and getting the right stories. She felt, particularly when we were talking about invisible women, there were invisible stories. There were invisible subjects that she knew in a sort of new, you know, you have editorial conferences at the beginning of the day where you set out, okay, what are the stories we're going to cover? And she knew that if she was sitting in that room, there will be some stories covered that otherwise wouldn't be. And then once you're out there covering the story, you had to do it right. You had to get the facts out. And there was so much, even back in her day, right? So much disinformation, so much lying, let's just call it what it is. And she said, I've got to cut through the lies. I've got to get the stories out. I've got to let people be heard, but also for folks to listen. And I think that was an engine that kept her going. And she felt that she had a unique role to play in getting out the right stories and getting the stories right. She had a unique responsibility to all those other folks who were depending on her, whether they be audiences, viewers, or even fellow journalists who depended on her, and in fact, in some cases, even the subject of, because I remember sitting in a car, she's driving through town some years ago, and she gets a call from Condoleezza Rice, who was at the time in very hot water for something, she said, or failed to say. And she's talking to Gwen about, well, what do I do? I didn't mean to say this, and so on and so forth. And she's helping a sister out while driving the car, you know, sort of on Route 295. And I said, well, and it wasn't partisan, it wasn't sort of like, okay, I'm going to help you out of this, as much as we want to get the right story out. And this is how you do it.
Did she have an awareness of her role in history, of her place in history?
I think so, but only because so many people told her that. You know, it wasn't one of these things that, look at me, I'm Gwen Ifill, I'm the queen of the world. Hello. It's sort of getting that reflected back at her, and from time to time she'd be in wonder about her place. But on the other hand, and this is probably something what you can experience and many of the professional women have, she still felt not completely valued. It was still a case where you've probably been all in rooms where you pipe up to give an opinion about something, it is ignored, and 10 minutes later, some man puts out the same words. Oh, that's a brilliant idea. So she figured the struggle continued, even though she enjoyed being around people and tried to enjoy the accolades. She said, always in her mind, there's more to be done. There's more to be heard. So she never got a really swelled head. That was the job of her family. And we did.
I love how you, as the big brother, you still see that beaming with pride and love and joy and admiration for your sister. Does this help you continue to keep her name, her legacy alive? Does it help you to continue talking about her in places like this?
It's a privilege. It's a privilege in many respects. It's a privilege that we were so close, that I could share some of the more intimate moments, sort of obviously as she was preparing for her next journey. It's interesting, I've told this story a few times. There was a British interviewer that was talking to Chris Jagger, the brother of Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones, and he said, well, you know, how does it feel being in your brother's shadow? And Chris Jagger says, well, I don't actually think I'm in his shadow, I think I'm in his light. And that's what I understand. That's really in a nutshell. Because all through her career, as she was getting more prominently known, she wanted to share that experience with all of us in her family. She never really hi-hatted us about this. I mean, once in a while she'd drop a first name. You know, I was talking to Barack the other day. But for the most part, she enjoyed her celebrity when she could share it with other people. And particularly, again, with her family. I mean, I was privileged, thanks to her, to meet, I think, 4 of the last 5 presidents. And to, you know, hang out in the White House and tell one little story about meeting Barack Obama, who is, if you ever meet him, he's tall and he's extremely handsome. He had a bad week the day before, you know, we were in the reception line, and he was shaking my hand and looking down at me like this and said, how you doing? I said, he wants to know how I'm doing. And I just said, well, how are you doing, Mr. President? He said, oh, how are you doing? And we went back and forth like this for about 20 seconds. Finally said, maybe I ought to go and meet Michelle. But that was the thing. She reflected that glory and was very generous with that, with her family and her friends. And in fact, used that from time to time to help us move forward. You know, her generosity, that's the other thing probably you ought to know about Gwen. Her generosity was extraordinary, it was legion. And so, to get back to the meat of your question, I mean, it's almost like a new vocation for me to kind of hold that banner aloft. And it's not been difficult to do because so many people, like the folks here, are doing it as well.
And we are so grateful to you that you answered the call to allow Project Nana to honor Gwen Ifill in this way, your little sister, your little big sister.
Big.
Dr. Roberto Ifill, thank you so much for celebrating your sister with us. Everybody, please.
Can I do just one brief fact check? Gwen would have been amused to be introduced as Dr. Ifill. Although I gotta say, she had something like over 30 honorary degrees, so I think she's earned her doctorate.
Yeah. Dr. Roberto Ifill, thank you. And now I would like to welcome Vanessa and her mother back to the stage for a special presentation.
Wasn't that beautiful? Yes. I remember getting the email back from Dr. Ifill, and he said, "You are persistent." Let me tell you, I put an APB out on him saying, I have to find a family member and beg them and to see how we are kindred spirits. And he said, yes. And so I'm so very, very grateful. Thank you so very much. So with my mom up here, on behalf of our family, on behalf of Merlise Yvonne McIntosh Anderson, who is probably sitting down having a wonderful conversation with your sister, and all of Project Nana, we want to dedicate this award and give you a plaque of dedication. And so the award reads as thus, and please do not make sure you don't say anything about me wearing my readers. But it's beautiful. Thank you very much. The award, the plaque says this. Project Nana is dedicated to reshaping perceptions of aging women's health and empowering them with autonomy over their bodies. We educate on gynecologic issues, promoting early detection through exams to reduce late-stage diagnoses of cancers and infections. Using storytelling, we amplify the voices of seasoned women, advocating for their access to care. The Gwen Ifill Seasoned Women's Champion Award honors a passionate leader who promotes the rights and needs of seasoned women. She stands as a beacon transforming the narrative around postmenopausal women and rejecting the stereotypes of diminished worth. The recipient advances equity by humanizing their experiences, advocating for improved healthcare access, challenging ageism and sexism, and amplifying the lifelong importance of women's health. The award celebrates those who mirror the strength of countless women, making tangible, transformative strides in advocacy. And so on behalf of Project Nana and all of the women here, we just want to present you with this plaque. Thank you. And this is just so you can have some of our gear, our Project Nana gear. Thank you very much.
Swag!
Thank you.